Hello, my name is Edward Davis, and I'm a graduate assistant at Florida Atlantic University in the Exercise Science and Health Promotion Department. This is my thesis proposal on Hardwired to Get Some Gains, an 8-week volume-equated study using autoregulation and daily undulating programming in well-trained lifters measuring hypertrophy and strength. Today we will be going over the definitions, muscular hypertrophy, strength adaptations and mechanisms, training to failure versus training to near max versus submax, autoregulation, load progression and variable modification, experimental design, the Wilks coefficient, our inclusion criteria, our 1 rep max protocol, application of autoregulation and average concentric velocity, and we will also look at statistical analysis and implications and discussion. Our definitions will be as follows. Autoregulation is the process of using self-regulating methods within resistance training. Hypertrophy is the progressive growth of muscle, which defined is increases in muscle cross-sectional area from an increase in muscle contractile unit content. Volume and intensity are the key predictors of muscular hypertrophy. Strength is the ability to generate maximal force within a single contraction. RPE is ratings of perceived exertion. RIR is repetitions in reserve. PRS is perceived recovery status scale. Within the sports of bodybuilding and powerlifting, each respectively, it is important to increase mass and strength gains. So it would be important to look at how do we optimize the programming for these individuals, leading to the question of what range of RPE is best for training. As you can see below in this slide, it is presented that we will name training to failure at an RPE of 9 to 10, near max, an RPE of 7 to 9, and submax, an RPE of anything below 6. The current literature that will be presented will be as follows, showing that hypertrophy and strength will become independent of repetition range. Modified daily undulating programming will be shown to be more beneficial than traditional daily undulating programming, and the training with autoregulation may be more beneficial than using % 1 rep max in experienced lifters. The background results section will look at muscular hypertrophy and strength and their mechanisms. Muscular protein synthesis versus muscle protein breakdown, we can term that as the protein turnover ratio. This is just a net balance that we look at. As long as the body is in a positive balance, then we will see hypertrophy. If it is in a negative balance, we will see atrophy. Myonuclear domain theory deals with how the satellite cell can assist by donating its nuclei to the myofibers surrounding, and how resistance training can increase the proliferation, allowing continued hypertrophy. Neuromuscular adaptations will lead to strength gains, and the size principle will dictate how the motor unit recruitment will occur, which is usually from smallest to largest, and those specific higher and highest threshold motor units will require minimal stimulus to occur. And as motor unit fatigue occurs, higher stimulus is required for continued contractions. So strength training is about recruiting the largest fibers with the highest threshold motor units to see those strength adaptations occur. Within this study by Klemp et al. In 2016, it can be concluded that hypertrophy and strength are independent of repetition range. So as you can see on the initial graph shown, that there is a DUP, daily undulating programming, low repetition versus a daily undulating programming high repetition group, both performing a very relatively similar volume. And you can also see in squat and bench that the post-test training really didn't show much of any difference in strength. Within this study by Zordas et al. In 2016, we can see that modified daily undulating programming has been shown to be more beneficial than traditional daily undulating programming. Traditional daily undulating programming consists of 3 days of squat and bench, let's say at Monday, Wednesday, Friday, looking specifically on a Monday being a hypertrophy day, Wednesday being a strength day, and Friday being the power day. Well, in the modified configuration, we can see that Monday would be the hypertrophy day, Wednesday would be the power day, and Friday would be the strength day. This would yield greater rest between the 2 days with the most volume, being the hypertrophy and the strength day. And as you can see, the volume performed between both groups is greater within the HPS configuration, leading to the conclusion that modified DUP is more beneficial at eliciting a higher volume than traditional DUP. Within this study by Zordos et al. In 2015, we can see that fluctuations in daily 1-rep max, which could potentially lead to inaccuracies using 1-rep max as a predictor of daily lifts. But there were increases in strength shown using daily 1-rep max training over the 37 days that they performed their lifts. And as you can see in the graph below, between 3 lifters, those are the fluctuations that occurred. The scale presented below is the RPE-RIR scale. It is a scale ranging between 1 to 10, and it is used to describe the intensity or effort of an individual lifting, usually within the squat, bench, or deadlift, but it can be used for other methods. As you can see, the correlated ratings are 10, maximum effort, 9.5, no further repetitions, but you could increase the load, a 9, meaning that you have 1 repetition left in the tank, an 8.5, meaning that you have about 1 to 2 repetitions remaining, 1 definitely, maybe a second, 8, meaning that you definitely have 2 repetitions remaining, 7.5, meaning that you have 2 repetitions definitely and maybe a third remaining, 7, meaning that you have 3 repetitions definitely remaining, a 5 to a 6, meaning that you have 4 to 6 repetitions remaining, 3 to 4, which is light effort, and 1 to 2, meaning that it is little to no effort. As discussed in the slides previous, 1 repetition max training may lead to daily fluctuations in 1-rep max, meaning that there are inherent inaccuracies that could be estimated with % 1-rep max. So, in an article by Helms et al. In 2018 using their study, autoregulatory training may be more effective in increasing strength in comparison to % 1-rep max. Now, what we can see is that the RPE group used in this study was able to perform more reps at a higher intensity using the RPE scale presented in this slide prior than the % 1-rep max group, thus meaning that they were able to train at that higher intensity, eliciting greater strength adaptations to occur once they came to that final 1-rep max test at the end of the study. With training to near max, training to failure, or training to submax, each one has its pros and cons. So failure training, we can see that, yeah, you'll recruit the largest threshold motor units, but you will possibly reach overtraining if you train for a long period of time. Near max training, you can see that, yeah, it's less fatiguing and safer than training to failure, and you'll still recruit some of the higher threshold motor units, but you may not recruit the highest threshold motor units required that you could see with failure training. But again, as the stimulus is adequate for training, then you'll be good. Submax training, you'll see that you may not reach the minimal stimulus required, and you will see RPE accuracy problems as the further away from maximal stimulus or maximum effort, then you'll see inaccuracies because it's more difficult to rate that RPE or exertion level. What we see here is that in a study by Helms et al. In 2016 that there is a correlation between velocity and the intensity, or in this case, the % 1-rep max of the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. So specifically the squat and bench, of which we will be looking at within the thesis proposed. There is a correlational value of 91% and 90% respectively. Thus leading to the purpose, which is to investigate training at various RPE ratings of 5, 8, and 10 and deduce which RPE range focused around those RPE ratings will be most beneficial for training goals of hypertrophy and strength. Our aim of this study will be to examine the hypertrophy and strength adaptations between a failure and two non-failure groups, both engaging in a volume-equated autoregulatory DUP style program in trained lifters. Our hypothesis is that training at the range of 7 to 9 RPE will be just as beneficial as training to failure in terms of recruiting those higher threshold motor units, and more useful than submax training in terms of the required stimulus for adaptations being attained. And muscular hypertrophy will not be extremely different across the groups, as volume has been equated, and again, as volume being one of the main predictors of muscular hypertrophy. Our inclusion criteria will consist of subjects between the ages of 18 to 35 years old. They have to achieve a depth in a squat according to US APL standards, as you can see in diagrams C and D, where the hip crease goes below the knee. They must be able to squat 1.5 times their body weight and bench 1.25 times their body weight. They must be healthy with no musculoskeletal diseases or contraindications to performing resistance training. They must have a minimum of 2 years of resistance training experience with squatting and benching a minimum of 1 times a week. And we will confirm the inclusion criteria with a health history questionnaire and training history questionnaire. We will look for a minimum of 10 subjects within each group. This is what we will term our auto-regulatory protocol, and you can see each group training at each range and what they will be doing over the course of 8 weeks, and of course the pre-1 rep max test and the post-1 rep max test. This is the time course of our program for our subjects. During week 0, they will fill out our informed consent, health history questionnaire, and training history questionnaire. We will be performing the initial anthropometric measures upon them, measuring height, weight, and body composition. We will also be taking our initial muscle thickness assessment, and we will have the subjects perform a 1 rep max test at the end of that. During week 1 through 8, they will engage in our modified daily undulating program, and anthropometric measures will be taken at the beginning of each session throughout the program. During the last day, they will engage in a 1 rep max test, and before the 1 rep max test is administered, the final anthropometric measure will be taken. And 48 to 72 hours after the program has concluded, the final muscle thickness measurement will be taken. Our primary variables that we will be measuring will be velocity in the squat and bench, RPE, RIR values per set, session RPE, PRS, anthropometrics consisting of height, mass, and body composition, muscle thickness, and 1 rep max. Our statistical analysis will consist of pre to post changes that we will use a paired t-test to assess at a set alpha of 0.05, analysis of covariance, and we will also be using effect size and a two-tailed independent t-test. First to be discussed is the limitations of this study. Now, as the study has not yet been performed, there are no immediate limitations other than the following: potential subject error from misjudgment of RPE, potential investigator error from misloading, technological error from technology failing or wasn't being turned on. There is a chance of inherent injury, always evident with resistance training, and with our high qualifications of inclusion criteria, it may lead to a small number of participants. Practical implications are, as autoregulatory training has been proven to be beneficial as well as DUP, the practical applications can be specific to the population discussed, which is bodybuilders and powerlifters. Any other related athletes or populations that match our inclusion criteria of this study, and it can also be used for the coaches or athletes and future research within this field of study. Suggestions for RPE, RIR scale ranges are to be used in trained populations and can be seen to have an increased opportunity of increasing returns from training in terms of hypertrophy and strength. Training using daily undulating programming with an autoregulatory component, and if you can obtain an OBS version 3, which it's actually relatively easy to obtain, but if you can't, that's no worries, because you can always use plus sets as a method of tracking, which is basically the final set you go till failure. Of course, have a spotter and work within a safe, understandable environment, and you can actually gauge your RPE accuracy of your sets performed prior to that. Thank you very much, and goodbye.